I'm Raylene Marks. Welcome to Modi'in and Beyond. Join me every Sunday between 3 and 4 on Radio Modi'in as we take a look at what's happening in Modi'in, Israel, and beyond. It's a Tuesday morning. It's a Tuesday morning. It's time for Modi'in and Beyond on Radio Modi'in with me, Raylene Marks. And we have a huge show ready for you. Joining me in the studio a little later is David Lang. He is the Executive Director of Israeli Cool. We are going to be talking about Roger Waters. A little later on, Yael Kinar and I are going to be paying tribute to the queen of rock and roll, Tina Turner. But first up, he is the host of Apple Podcast #1 hit, The Jewish State, all the way from London. It is such a pleasure to be joined by Johnny Gould. Johnny, welcome back to Modi'in and Beyond.
Raylene, it's an absolute pleasure to be back with you, and hello, and I hope that you can hear me.
We can hear you absolutely perfectly. I mean, you and I have been trying to get this going for ages, and finally we have half term and we're able to chat to each other. And something quite extraordinary has been happening between Israel and the United Kingdom over the last year or so. We've certainly seen an increase and a warming of relations between the two countries. What do you attribute this to?
It's been going well between Israel and the UK pretty much since the Boris Johnson era of the premiership. And as we all know, that was a tremendous crossroads for this country, because the 2019 general election for the Jewish community was probably the biggest since the Oliver Cromwell era, because Boris Johnson beat off Jeremy Corbyn to become Prime Minister. And talk about an opposite view of the Middle East from Jeremy Corbyn to that of Boris Johnson. There couldn't be a wider one. And when Boris won the election, the first thing he did was make a video which he put out on, wishing everyone a happy Hanukkah and saying that this would be the first of a number of Jewish celebrations that we would all like to join in with. And when you consider the rampant, near out of control anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism that we've experienced in the Labour Party, what threatened the country with his election, Jeremy Corbyn, that was quite a thing. And there has been a growing diplomacy. Liz Truss, who was Foreign Secretary at the time, then became our Premier for, well, just over 40 days.
Only beaten by a lettuce.
Yes. Actually, probably go far as to say an actual Zionist, someone who is Rishi Sunak is, I think, pragmatic about Israel. He supports it, he understands it, he's bought into the kind of general milieu of the Conservative Party. He's not ideologically quite as supportive as Liz Truss, but there have been attempts for him to come and visit Israel during the 5th year. And of course, we all know that Benjamin Netanyahu was in the UK during the height of the judicial reform crisis and met with Sunak at Downing Street. And we know that in November of last year, President Herzog came on an official visit to the UK, and it's the Herzog family who have deep links with the United Kingdom. That is roughly from where they made Aliyah from, there in Ireland, where their family were born in Jewish communities in Leeds and Manchester and Dublin. So there's a lot going on. There's a depth of understanding. And it appears to me that there is an understanding in the Conservative Party and other centre-right organisations around Europe that Israel is an ally in the West in this increasingly polarised world. Countries, and it's time for countries who haven't yet aligned to think about which side they go to.
Now let's talk about President Herzog for a second, because he's been to the United Kingdom about 3 times in the last, I'd say, 6 or 7 months. He was there for Her Majesty the Queen, for her funeral. He was there on a state visit, and he was there for the coronation of King Charles. And something quite interesting happened. It was reported in our media here that the king pulled President Herzog to the front of the line and spoke to him about what a robust democracy he believes Israel is. And then a story broke in the Daily Mail that the king will be visiting Kenya, and he's also making noises about possibly visiting us in Israel as well. I mean, we know he'll have to go to the West Bank. The king is not political, but it would be quite a massive moment for the state of Israel to have a sitting monarch come and visit us for the first time. What do you make of this?
I think it would be a landmark moment for Israel-British relations. The Queen, who was a quiet, religious individual who believed in her Protestantism, her Anglicanism, was denied the chance of actually ever going to Israel, to visit Nazareth, to visit Bethlehem, to visit the Via Dolorosa in Jerusalem, even to see the non-Christian ornaments in Jerusalem, like the beautiful Kotel, for example. She was denied that by the Foreign Office. Prince William has been to Israel on an official visit, put a koppel on, went to the Kotel and actually prayed. There is a very beautiful part of the royal family which Prince Charles is descended from that the Queen isn't. And that, of course, is Princess Alice of Greece, who we know is honoured in Yad Vashem because of her role in the Holocaust, where she sheltered the Cohen family in her palace and saved them from the Gestapo. And she is buried in Gethsemane in Jerusalem. That is the Duke of Edinburgh's mother. So we have a royal family who, in the past, have had a distinctly cold relationship with Jewish people, warming up. And King Charles himself is a lover of religions. He really loves the idea of people's religious practice. And though the coronation was very much a traditional Anglican coronation, you know, it's still the top dog religion in Britain. It is still the state religion. Make no mistake. He still was able to welcome and indulge in the celebration, the coronation, the smaller communities, the minority communities of the Sikhs, the Hindus, and the Jews. Chief Rabbi Mervis was extremely well looked after during the coronation. He was invited to stay in the palace with his wife, and they observed Shabbat actually in the palace. So we have a new king who loves religion and I think is open to the state of Israel in a way that perhaps was simply not there before.
I mean, let's make mention of it. Whatever the royal family does towards British Jewry reverberates around the world and is hugely symbolic. Many people didn't understand that it wasn't the Queen's decision not to visit Israel. She was forbidden here from coming by the Foreign Office. I'm sure she would have loved to have visited Israel. It certainly would have sent a message to all of us. But now, you are one of my favorite podcast show hosts. And I'm not just saying this because I'm speaking to you on air. You have a phenomenal range of guests that you speak to. What's coming up soon? Because I love to listen to your show.
Well, you're very kind, Ellen. Thank you very much. Currently, Ronen Bergman is my current podcast guest. He of the epic book Rise and Kill First, the story of Israel's secret services. And Ronen's book, he expected it to take a year. It took 8 years, 6 years to compile and 2 years to verify, publish, and get lawyered. And that's simply because the security services refused to verify or endorse any word of it. It was a clandestine analysis and collection of data from former operators. It's an amazing piece of work. I wish I had more time with Ronen, but we did talk about the key ideas of what motivates Mossad, what motivates Shabak. And I think anyone who is a proud supporter of Israel will enjoy the discourse. The next episode is a first for me. It's episode 112, and I will be handing the microphone over for the first time to another interviewee, to another interviewer, and it is Jonathan Freedland, the author of The Escape Artist, the million-selling bestseller, which chronicled the story of Rudolf Verba, the teenager who managed to escape Auschwitz and warn his fellow Hungarian Jews of the disaster, the horror that was going on inside Auschwitz, to warn those poor people in 1944 in Budapest and other Jewish population centers, do not get on the train, because if you get on the train, it will be the end of you. And his accuracy and his letter and his detail of what was going on reached the desks of Churchill and Roosevelt and the Pope, etc. And it forced Horthy, the fascist leader of Hungary, to stop the trains, because the Allies said to Horthy, if you continue to deport your Jews and you lose the war, we will make sure that you stand trial for war crimes. And he actually stopped. So we have found an extraordinary person who knew both Rudolf Verba and the other man who was his accomplice in escaping Auschwitz. These were among the first Jewish people to actually escape a concentration camp. His name was Alfred Wetzler. Her name is Bea Lefkowitz, and she is a member of my synagogue. And she came up to me during a Kiddush and she said, I loved your podcast. I knew Rudolf Verba, and Alfred Wetzler was my uncle. So she knew these two brave men who, of course, are no longer with her. So I told Jonathan Freedland, who'd written that lovely book, and he said, well, I've got a paperback book coming back. I need to update it. Can I do Bea Lefkowitz? So I put them in touch. I said, yeah, you can do that as long as I can have the interview. So that's my next episode. And it's going to be a very, very special episode, because it's going to add weight to the Escape Artist story. For those of you who've read the book, there will be extra pieces of information in the book about this remarkable story that hitherto haven't been published. So that's the next one, Rolene.
I can't wait, because you have some truly remarkable guests. Now, tell our listeners where they can find the Jewish State, because believe me, you are not going to want to miss listening to Johnny Gould's The Jewish State.
You're very kind, Rolene. You can find Johnny Gould's Jewish State, and Johnny is spelled in that Jewish way that you spell Johnny, J-O-N-N-Y, Johnny Gould's Jewish State, and you'll find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and even lesser well-known podcast platforms. Wherever you get your podcasts, search for Johnny Gould's Jewish State and enjoy the library, the snapshot, if you like, of the last few years of Jewish and Israeli history.
It really is remarkable, and time flies when you're having fun. And I've been dying to speak to you for ages. We're going to have to get you back on again soon. So the next half term or the next opportunity, you have a date right here on Modi'in and Beyond with me. That was Johnny Gould, host of The Jewish State. Don't go away. After this short music break, David and I are going to be speaking about Roger Waters.
stay this time. We are the children, last generation. We are the ones they left behind. And I wonder when we are ever gonna change. Living under the fear till nothing else remains. We don't need another hero. We don't need to know the way home. All we want is what's beyond. Looking for something we can rely on. There's got to be something better out there. Love and compassion. That day is coming. All else are castles built in the air. And I wonder when we are ever gonna change. Living under the field till nothing else remains. All the children say we don't need another hero. We don't need to know the way home. All we want is what's beyond. So what do we do with our lives? We leave our mate alone. Will our story shine like a light? Or is this all down? Is it all or nothing? We don't need another hero. We don't need to know the way home. All we want is what's beyond. All the children say we don't need another hero.
Over the last couple of days, we've heard people say she's simply the best, and she was simply the best. Tina Turner, we're going to be paying tribute to her a little later with Yael Kinar. I remember when that song came out, that to me spoke about a powerful warrior woman. And I'm so delighted to be joined again in studio by David Lang, the Executive Director of Israeli Cool Israel Advocacy, and somebody who's not so powerful, not the greatest performer, and has really caused a lot of controversy over the last week or so, is one Roger Waters. Now, David, you have a bit of a background interacting, should we say, with Mr. Waters. Tell us a little bit about that. Give us some context.
Oh, great that you remember that. First of all, thanks for having me, Rolene. So basically, it must have been about a decade ago. I mean, I've been writing against Roger Waters' anti-Semitism for well over a decade. And there was one of my first posts was titled The Dark Side of the Moron. And you can imagine it wasn't very complimentary of Mr. Waters. And he was trying at the time to convince Alan Parsons of the Alan Parsons Project to not come to Israel. This was the boycott campaign was underway, and Roger Waters was really trying his best to discourage Alan Parsons. And Alan Parsons is a big friend of Israel, actually. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. Huge friend of Israel. And he wasn't going to have any bar of this. So how did he respond to this letter by Roger Waters? He actually linked to a post on social media of mine, the Dark Side of the Moron post. And as a result, Roger Waters was not happy about it. And Roger Waters responded to Alan Parsons' post by referring to Israeli Cool as some obscure extremist website. And he was very upset about it. And this actually was one of my crowning achievements, I think, in my life, to have Roger Waters, prickled by something that I wrote. And it's just encouraged me to basically write a lot more about him.
He seems to love to dish out the abuse and the criticism, but cannot take it. Now, in the last week, he has dominated the headlines. We've just spoken to Johnny Gould in the United Kingdom. I'm wondering if the United Kingdom is going to be taking action against Roger Waters for his performances in Germany. Last week was Berlin. Very, very controversial, very offensive, very hurtful. He is now being investigated for incitement of hate. Put us in the picture. What would prompt the Berlin police to open up an investigation into incitement for hate? Because that is a very serious accusation.
Yeah, well, Germany, with its history, are, of course, very sensitive about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. As a result, they're trying to, let's say, reinvent themselves or pay for the crimes of the past. So they're actually, from what I understand, investigating Roger Waters mainly or even solely because he's been dressing up in this SS-style uniform as part of his performance. Now, maybe I'm going to say something a little bit controversial here, but, I believe in speaking the truth. If that is the case, I don't really support that. And I think a lot of people on our side are missing the point with this. And what do I mean? Well, first and foremost, of course, Roger Waters is a vehement anti-Semite and Jew hater. We have all the receipts in the world. And we can talk about that, but I'm not sure we have enough time on your show to go through all of the receipts.
But his former bandmate has...
Well, correct. Dave Gilmour's wife, Polly Sampson, earlier this year called him anti-Semitic to the core or something along those lines. And then David Gilmour basically amplified what his wife had said. Interesting times for Pink Floyd.
That's quite an indictment against him. So we go back to the concert and he's wearing this uniform and...
Right, so the uniform itself, there were other things in the concert which are very anti-Semitic. So there are things like he projected on the stage, his show is a full production. It's not just the music. He's got lots of things going on in the background. Images on the big screen and flying pig. We'll get to the inflatable pig in a minute. So we have all these things. So at one point, he puts up the name of Shireen Abu Akleh. This was the Al Jazeera journalist that was killed in unclear circumstances during a firefight between Jenin terrorists and our brave IDF soldiers.
As what is common, unfortunately, for war correspondents.
Yes. And it was inconclusive. And if she was killed by the IDF, then it was definitely an accident. Our soldiers, the most moral army in the world, are not in the habit of killing any innocents, let alone someone with press written on them. And this, the State Department analysis borne this out as well. At the very worst, she was accidentally killed in the firefight. Okay, so, but the anti-Semites of the world, like Roger Waters, are claiming that we assassinated her and killed her in cold blood. A modern-day blood libel, as it were.
Notably, he's been very quiet about Russia holding a Wall Street journalist captive, a Ukrainian journalist that was killed, but maybe that's just because he supports Putin.
He does. He does support Russia, and that's part of his hypocrisy. So he put up on this big screen, Shireen Abu Akleh, her name, and died or was killed and for being Palestinian, the implication being very clear, that we murdered her in cold blood because she's Palestinian. Now, Roger Waters, one of the anti-Semitic things that he's been saying time and again is he's been saying that we kill Palestinians and our alleged mistreatment of them is because of Jewish supremacy, which, by the way, is a phrase which was popularized by former KKK wizard David Duke.
You are the company you keep.
Exactly. So he put that up. And then a few seconds later, he put up Anne Frank, her name, crime for being Jewish. So in other words, he was drawing this comparison between our alleged mistreatment of Palestinians with the Nazi treatment of Jews, which is highly anti-Semitic. And it's actually part of the working definition, the IRHA working definition of anti-Semitism, which, by the way, Roger Waters categorically rejects.
Of course. I mean, it would hold a mirror up to his behavior and would hold him accountable for a lot of his rhetoric and actions.
Right. So this was one part or anti-Semitic part of his concert. He was speaking about the powers that be, this sort of unnamed enemy, these higher-ups, these, rich oligarchs. He didn't mention the J word or even the Z word during the concert. However, it was very clear that this unnamed enemy is playing into the anti-Semitic trope of this powerful entity that's pulling the strings. And of course, when then you're lumping in this enemy as being responsible for the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh, for instance, we all know to whom he's referring, or at least implying. So again, there was plenty of anti-Semitism in his concert. But my objection to people trying to prosecute him or pointing to the SS uniform is it obfuscates the real anti-Semitism. What do I mean by this? He's been using this as part of the wall for decades. Because he's anti-fascism, at least that's his official position. So it's parody.
Because a lot of his supporters have come out, and you and I are very, very active on social media, and have said things like, don't be stupid, this is the wall, grow up, that kind of language. But I don't recall Pink Floyd ever conflating the Holocaust and, unfortunately, journalists being killed in combat, as well as using other analogies. I don't recall Pink Floyd ever doing that. In fact, they're on the record of saying that he's an anti-Semite. But we have to be, as you say, very, very specific and careful how we make our arguments against people like Waters.
Because as you said, the other side are already latching onto this. So I've seen a number of people use this as an example, mentioning exactly what you just mentioned, and then lumping that together with our legitimate criticism, which they're not referring to. And they're saying, look, there's a witch hunt for Roger Waters. These allegations are clearly untrue. So we're shooting ourselves in the foot, as it were, if we bring up things which I find irrelevant. So I do hope he's prosecuted, but not on the basis of him wearing this, this parody uniform, as it were.
Let's go to Frankfurt now, because he performed in Frankfurt 2 nights ago. He didn't wear the uniform. He didn't make the Anne Frank analogy, but there were some quite interesting things happening in the audience. Let's talk about that. What happened?
Yeah, so it was quite a welcome relief to see footage from a Roger Waters concert that didn't make you go, it was actually more like, yes. So we saw some Israel supporters in the crowd waving
Not
Israeli
Jewish,
flag.
by the way.
Yeah, it turned out that they weren't Jewish. We didn't know that at the time, of course. But they were in the crowd. They were waving the Israeli flag, singing Am Yisrael Chai. And one of the brave souls, and he wasn't Jewish. Maybe the other ones were. We don't know. But they were definitely Israel supporters. Got up on the stage and waved the flag before he was tackled or taken off the stage by Roger Waters' bodyguards. And it later came out, it was in the Times of Israel this morning, that this supporter claimed that he was threatened with physical harm by Roger Waters' bodyguards.
Not a good look, Germany. Not a good
look, Germany. Not a good look, Roger Waters. And also, I saw some other footage where there were people in the crowd, some of his real hardcore fans, that were actually attacking the pro-Israel supporters with the flag, taking the flag out of their hand. It looked like someone was trying to rip the flag. So, you are the company you keep, as you mentioned earlier on in the show. Someone
actually reported that there were death threats made against those who were in the audience waving their Israeli flag.
Oh, that's new. I didn't read that, but I'm always willing to learn new things.
And coupled with this, there was a massive protest outside by members of the Frankfurt Jewish community. I mean, I know that Witzo, who I'm a part of, the Frankfurt ladies were out there in full force, because initially what prompted this was that a court order was overturned allowing him to perform there. Now, Frankfurt is definitely an adoptee of IRA, the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. It's going to be quite fascinating to see whether or not the city of Frankfurt takes action.
Yeah, well, the council or the city of Frankfurt did, as you mentioned, intend to cancel the show. And then there was a petition launched by some anti-Israel people in support of Roger Waters, and it created quite a buzz. And that's as a result, there was this court order. Now, actually, Roger Waters tries to exploit this court order in his show. And again, he lies about it. So the court order basically did not find that he's not anti-Semitic. That wasn't the issue. The issue had to do with whether he's going to be doing something insightful and hateful and things like that. And they actually, if I'm not mistaken, or if I recall correctly, they did address, they did know that the show was going to contain him in the SS uniform and the like. And they found that it was, let's say, freedom of speech, and it wasn't that he actually identified with the Nazis. Something along those lines. So it was actually a very specific topic that the court ruled on. But it wasn't like, we find that Roger Waters is not anti-Semitic. Now, at the start of his show, we've seen footage from his Berlin concert and Frankfurt concert and the like. He writes that I announced to everyone that a court in Germany recently found that I am not anti-Semitic. Something along those lines. And then he proclaims, and for the record, I am not anti-Semitic. He protested too much, I think.
The lady doth protest too much. You know what I found extraordinary is he was on Joe Rogan, probably the biggest podcaster in the world right now, just a couple of months ago, and they were determining what is and isn't anti-Semitism. I mean, to me, it's absolutely astounding. It's so patronizing. It is so arrogant for members of other communities to determine what constitutes discrimination or persecution against another minority community. It's really just quite extraordinary. If you're listening to Joe Rogan, I highly recommend you go listen to Johnny Gould's The Jewish State, a much better selection. But now Roger is going to the United Kingdom, and we've already heard murmurings from a member of parliament from Manchester saying, given what he did in Germany, we don't want him here. Do you think that this will gain any traction? I mean, he's also going to Birmingham and then to Glasgow. But do you think that other countries, other cities are watching this thinking, this guy is potentially a powder keg and is very dangerous?
It's really hard to tell because, Germany obviously has the history, as I mentioned, and they're very sensitive about that. And there are laws regarding hate speech. If there aren't laws in other countries, freedom of speech sort of rules the day these days, especially in enlightened Europe, other parts of enlightened Europe. So I'm not sure, but any sort of buzz, any sort of blowback can still have an impact. So even if he isn't banned per se, or his concerts are not cancelled, we can still have an effect. And we saw that perhaps, I don't know for sure, but when he didn't invoke Anne Frank, and when he didn't don the parody SS uniform during that last concert, I do believe that it was probably at least partially a result of the blowback that he's been receiving. Now, actually, I saw some footage that he posted on social media where he spoke about that, and then he actually burst into tears. Crocodile tears.
I cannot roll my eyes back far enough. I might detach my
Crimea River, right? Crimea River.
Crimea River.
So what I'm saying is, even with a big shot like Roger Waters, I do believe that if we make their lives uncomfortable, these anti-Semites, it actually does have a real-world impact. And that's why I do what I do in terms of being very proactive. Some people are of the point of view that we should put our, bury our heads in the sand, not amplify the anti-Semites. But Roger Waters, they don't get much bigger than that. He's one of the highest-paid rock musicians in the world, whether we like it or not. He's a terrible person, of course, but he's still going to get the publicity, and we have to basically help bring out the true narrative about this disgusting individual, and not just let the one narrative about being a so-called human rights defender hold sway.
Let's talk about that for a second, because there are a lot of people who say, we face a tsunami of hate. We shouldn't give oxygen to some of the comments that are out there, and that it's just so overwhelming. We should just shut up. Well, I take the opposite approach. I know you do as well. And there's a very, very famous African metaphor that you can fell an elephant with a mosquito. So even though we might be facing this tsunami, this barrage of hatred and anti-Semitism, and boy, do we see some pearls out there in the world, including, what was her name, Coffee Shop Karen the other day.
Another Karen.
Another Karen. Poor people named Karen. But it is so important that today we use our voices, every single one of us, that we make it known to people out there that we're not going to sit back. We're not going to allow you to discriminate against us, persecute us with impunity. That this time, Jews fight back.
Absolutely. And what people have to realize is we have the truth on our side. That's a huge weapon. Now, with having the truth on our side, it behooves us to do something with that and not sit back. And another thing is that it really, as I mentioned, it really does work. I've got a lot of experience fighting against these Jew haters. And a lot of times you can tell it gets to them. It gets to them, whether they're losing their jobs because their Jew hatred comes to light, or with Roger Waters now he's fighting, court bans and things like that. Let's make life uncomfortable for them. They're making life very uncomfortable for us again. So the least we can do is fight back.
Let this be a message to all Jew haters out there. We are going to put you on blast. Now, you are the executive director of Israeli Cool. Tell our listeners where they can find you.
Well, the easiest way to direct listeners is to israelicool.com, ISRAELLYCOOL. And then on that website where you see all my posts, you'll also see the social media handles.
Brilliant. David Lang, thank you for joining me in studio. We're going to take a short music break. After this, the queen of entertainment, Yael Kinan.
That was good.
Too much fun.
עכשיו הגיע הרגע, הרי חיכית לי ואני תמיד חיכיתי לך, והנה היום הזה הגיע. עכשיו מבטיח שאף פעם לא תהי לבד, ואם פתאום תעלמי, אחכה כל הלילה, ואלחש בתפילה שאליי תחזרי. ואם תבואי אליי, ישנת כל הלילה, ואלחש לך מילים שתדעי שאני שלך, ובבוקר תראי, נשאר ביחד, הולכים את הדרך הזאת, לתמיד יד ביד. ואם תבואי אליי, נשאר כל הלילה, ואלחש לך מילים שתדעי שאני שלך, ובבוקר תראי, נשאר ביחד, הולכים את הדרך הזאת, לתמיד יד ביד. הרגע, הרי חיכית לי ואני תמיד חיכיתי לך, והנה היום הזה הגיע. עכשיו מבטיח שאף פעם לא תהי לבד, ואם פתאום תעלמי, אחכה כל הלילה, ואלחש בתפילה שאליי תחזרי. ואם תבואי אליי, ישנת כל הלילה, ואלחש לך מילים שתדעי שאני שלך, ובבוקר תראי, נשאר ביחד, הולכים את הדרך הזאת, לתמיד יד ביד. ואם תבואי אליי, נשאר כל הלילה, ואלחש לך מילים שתדעי שאני שלך, ובבוקר תראי, נשאר ביחד, הולכים את הדרך הזאת, לתמיד יד ביד. ואם תבואי אליי, ישנת כל הלילה, ואלחש לך מילים שתדעי שאני שלך, ובבוקר תראי, נשאר ביחד. רדיו מודיעין, רדיו מודיעין.
שלטק מודיעין הוא מתחם עבודה שיתופי ליזמים וחברות. בשלטק תמצאו עמדות עבודה אישיות, משרדים סגורים, חדרי ישיבות מרווחים, מרחבי הדרכה משודרגים, בקיצור, כל מה שעסק בתמיכה צריך. שלטק, עסקים שגדלים יחד.
מחפשים חוויה משפחתית שוברת שגרה? דייט מוצלח ורומנטי? חוות צהלה מזמינה אתכם לרכיבת שטח חווייתית במיוחד בתוך הנוף עוצר הנשימה של עמק איילון. חוות צהלה, תתכוננו להתאהב. לפרטים 055-662-6773.
טרייד סטיישן, אפליקציית המסחר זוכת הפרסים. לסחור רק עם הטוב ביותר. אליט פלטפורמס, המקפצה הפיננסית שלכם.
ברוכות הבאות למכללה האקדמית לחינוך תלפיות בחולון. מכללה שהיא בית. בבית שלנו יש מרצים עם תשוקה לחינוך. סגל מנהלי עם תודעת שירות גבוהה, והמון יחס אישי לצד מצוינות אקדמית. אלפי בוגרות המכללה המובילות את שדה החינוך בישראל היא העדות הטובה ביותר, שמכללת תלפיות הינה המקום הנכון ביותר עבור מי שרוצה להצליח, להשפיע ולחנך את דור העתיד. כי החינוך מתחיל מהבית. לצד המתקנים הפיזיים המתקדמים, המערכים הטכנולוגיים והקמפוס המתחדש, אנו מציעים לכן 5 מסלולי לימוד לתואר ראשון. חינוך לגיל הרך, חינוך יסודי, חינוך על יסודי, חינוך מיוחד ואומנות, כך שכל סטודנטית תוכל לבחור את המסלול המתאים ביותר עבורה. במכללת תלפיות תמצאי את כל היתרונות במקום אחד, יחס אישי ותוכנית מותאמת אישית. קמפוס בוטיק חכם וחדשני, מרחק הליכה מתחנת הרכבת, כל זה במרכז הארץ. כולנו כאן בשבילך, מאמינים בך. צוות מכללת תלפיות.
מכללת תלפיות לחינוך, ללמוד לתואר ראשון עם החברות שלי בדרך שלי. זו תלפיות שלי.
רדיו מודיעין, התושבים מדברים. רדיו מודיעין, התושבים מדברים.
Welcome back to Modi'in and Beyond with me, Rolene Marks, here on Radio Modi'in. Now, it's that time of the Tuesday where we speak to the Queen of Entertainment, our wonderful Yael Kina. And because I'm joined by the fabulous David Lang, we're going to chat to Yael about Tina Turner, the Ozempic craze, and of course, Scandival. Yael, welcome back to Modi'in and Beyond.
Thank you so much.
So good to have you back. Now, one of our favorites passed away over the weekend. People have said she's simply the best, and she was simply the best. In fact, she was simply extraordinary. The phenomenal Tina Turner, the queen of rock and roll.
Yes, Tina Turner died last week at age 83, and she really lived many lives within her life. She started off with a difficult childhood, difficult family situation. She married Ike Turner at a very young age, and that was an abusive relationship with domestic abuse. She had a child with him. She had another child with a different partner as well, and grew to fame. I mean, started off sort of singing with him, then ended up with her own career. Super energetic, tremendous performer, you know, winning all the awards, all the Grammys, all the attention, all the adoration. And then she had almost a second part of her life, which started when she met German music producer on a visit to Germany. He was supposed to meet her at the airport to take her with the agency. His name was Erwin Bach. And they've been together for 40 years. And that was really such a healing relationship. He was 16 years her junior. He didn't have kids of his own, but they got married after about 15 years together. And they lived in Switzerland and had like a multi-million-dollar estate overlooking a lake in Zurich. And she had been struggling with health issues for the last few years. In 2016, he donated a kidney to her. And really was this big love story, and the pain in her life didn't stop because her adult son died by suicide, and her other son died of cancer. So there was a lot of pain amongst the highs and the glory and the money. And she made a choice to retire on her own terms. You know, you see these. I won't give Madonna as an example, but you have sometimes referenced how, you know, trying too hard for too long. And Tina just sort of said, you know what? This is going to be my last performance. She made that decision. She took a turn to have this quiet European life with lots of money and lots of love, and was forever adored. And I think, you know, she died in peace with her family as much as possible. And I think her music will live on.
Do you know what really strikes me as quite remarkable about Tina Turner is that, as you said, she lived this life of incredible hardships, the abusive marriage with Ike Turner, the loss of a child by suicide, health problems, and yet we never heard her complain. It's such a lesson, don't you think, David, for today's hypersensitive, if the emotional paper cut, they fall apart generation was a woman who had really been through the ringer and came through the other side, always positive, always inspirational, went out at the top of her game, gave us this incredible gift through her body of music, and we never heard her complain.
Yeah,
if
such
anything,
dignity. And I think, I mean, we see now, for example, Celine Dion, who's having health struggles and was forced to cancel a tour and said, you know, I think I might not be able to tour again. And also had, you know, lost her husband, had fertility issues. And sometimes the song and the stage and the performance is what they cling on to for just self-actualization and the definition of who they are. But if they are able to, you know, make the choice to enjoy their lives and not be a slave to the performance of it all, she did it with grace.
You know, there was an interview that I found on YouTube yesterday. It's about 13 minutes. She was speaking to Jonathan Ross. I think it was 2017. If you are on your internet at the moment, Google it. Tina Turner speaks to Jonathan Ross. You get such an understanding of the warm, the charismatic, and just the graceful person that she was. A true queen, a titan of rock. Tina Turner, may you rest in peace. Let's talk about something else, because I've been curious about this next story because it's dominating the entertainment news everywhere. It's such a huge story. It's the Scandoval. So please, for those of us who are not enlightened about the Scandoval, that's David and I.
Well, you know what? You're in the minority at this point, because this is on CNN. It's on national.
It's everywhere.
I've been too busy with Roger Waters.
It is an interesting phenomenon culturally, which I think someone should be writing their PhD about. Basically, it's a lowbrow reality TV show that was a spinoff from The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Lisa Vanderpump, British, lovely, wealthy restaurateur, society woman who owned a few restaurants. And there was this idea that the staff at some of her restaurants, there's a restaurant called Sir, there's a restaurant called Palm, she's open now in Las Vegas, that the staff themselves are all kind of really good looking and all kind of mixing in with each other, and it's the place to be. And at the time, one of the waitresses, Sheena Shea, was having an affair with the husband of Brandy Glanville, who was on Real Housewives. There's 100 crossovers. But really, this isn't, you know, a Meryl Streep level show. And 10 seasons in, literally, this has been a 10-year show. In the last few months, 2 of the characters, they're not characters, they're real life people, have been found out to have been having an affair. Dun, now, dun, dun. Tale as old as time, affairs happen. The protagonist, there's a Tom whose last name is Sandoval, which has then triggered the scandal, #Scandoval, to take over all of social media. He is in a long-term relationship with another cast member named Ariana. They bought a house together. They wrote a book together. They've been together, not married, but together for 9 years. All this while, there's a new girl who befriends them named Raquel, whose real name is Rachel, but we'll let it go.
We got to glam it
She
up,
came to
babe. We got to glam it up.
Pardon? Oh, we got to glam it up. Yes, yes. There was also someone who just calls herself Lala now. And she literally was part of their group. She was engaged to another guy on the show, a James British. You know what, you guys? This is deep research. It's very hard to relay the intricacies of this scandal, but basically, and the social media aspect of it all, it kind of unfolded on live TV. And one of them was being interviewed on Watch What Happens Live with Andy Cohen, as Ariana found out in real time, seeing on the phone a picture that indicated that Tom was having an affair with Raquel. It has hit a nerve in society to a degree that I find a little perplexing, because let's not kid, affairs happen. And back 65 years ago, when Elizabeth Taylor had an affair with Eddie Fisher, who was married to her friend Debbie Reynolds, that was a scandal, but it wasn't a frame-by-frame image where everybody could watch every episode and look for clues, and she said this and he said that, and what does it mean, and how could this happen? So I don't know. It's been literally months now. The reunion has aired. It's going to be a 3-part reunion. We've had 1 part already aired last week. There's been viewing parties, large screens all over LA, all over the world. I watched it in Jerusalem with great delight. What we'll possibly talk about once this is resolved, and will the show continue filming with each other? Has this ruined everything? The demise of society? #Scandal.
Because let's not kid, these are like D-list celebrities. I mean, I don't even think they're D-list. I think they're like F-list celebrities on a reality show. And literally, I'm a pop culture vulture. I read everything from Australia to the US to the UK to everywhere in between. And you cannot escape the scandal. It is literally everywhere. It's dominating everything. But now, where do we go from here? I mean, other scandals are just not going to live up to this level of scrutiny.
I know, and it is interesting why this is so scandalous. This group of people isn't particularly known for their high morals. It's not a show filmed in Amish land. They've all kind of cheated with each other. For some reason, the fact that the betrayal is very much also between these 2 women who were close friends, and Ariana, who was cheated on by Tom with Raquel, was good friends with Raquel, and she stayed at their house, and they went out together, and at some point somebody said, look, she's spending a lot of time with you all. Is it weird? And she was like, no, not at all, not at all. And she was her biggest defender. So I think that enraged people. And also, they started off the show, they were in their 20s and their 30s. Tom is 40 years old. People feel like he should know better. And I don't know, but it did something to everyone.
It does sound like selective outrage, though, because these reality shows, they tend to feed off these sorts of scandals. They're even reality shows where the whole concept is a scandal. And this sounds very tame from what you're describing. So maybe, I don't know, it's very perplexing to me. It doesn't sound like a huge scandal in terms of what this generation find reprehensible.
I can relate to you the level of drama, and maybe it has died down because we're multiple weeks in. When this broke, people were like in meetings, texting each other. I mean, tongue-in-cheek, aware of the fact that this isn't really such a big deal, but people were like, this is our, Vietnam, this is the moment that changes everything. Could it be true? People thought it was a hoax, and then it came out that it was real. Meanwhile, they're monetizing off of it. They're getting ad campaigns. The scorned woman, Ariana, is now been offered a spot in Dancing with the Stars. She's now America's sweetheart.
As you do.
Yeah.
Laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah, absolutely. And we shall see. I'm sure reality TV will provide a different lowbrow scandal for us soon.
Well, the show is Vanderpump Rules. If you want to get your Scandival fix, visit it there. And that's it for this week. Thank you to the Queen of Entertainment, Yael Akina, the King of Israel Advocacy, David Lang, and to the King of Podcasting, Johnny Gould, for being my guest today. I'm Rolene Marks. This is Modi In and Beyond. Join me again next Tuesday, 10 a.m. on Radio Modi In.
Hey, little sister, what have you done? Hey, little sister, who's the only one? Hey, little sister, who's your Superman? Hey, little sister, who's the one you want? Hey, little sister, shotgun. It's a nice day to start again. It's a nice day for a white wedding. It's a nice day to start again. Hey, little sister, who is it you're with? Hey, little sister, what's your fascination? Hey, little sister, shotgun, oh yeah. Hey, little sister, who's your Superman? Hey, little sister, shotgun. It's a nice day to start again. It's a nice day for a white wedding. It's a nice day to start again. Oh. Nothing fair in this world. There is nothing safe in this world. And there's nothing sure in this world. And there's nothing pure in this world. And if there's something left in this world, start again.